Hey guys, this is God of Politics and welcome back to a brand new video. In this video, I'm going to be discussing why Joe Biden, the former vice president, is still the most electable candidate for the Democrats come the general election in 2020. Now, when Joe Biden first entered the race in around April, he stressed the argument that he was the most electable candidate, the person with the largest chance to beat Donald Trump over people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and all the other candidates running, frankly. That was Joe Biden and what he was stressing when he first entered, and that is what he is stressing now. To look at the Democratic primary specifically, a lot of people have argued, oh, Joe Biden came fourth place in Iowa, therefore he's not electable anymore. Well, if you actually look at the national polls, you see that in the last 6 months, even if you go to the max, if we go over to a year ago, he was at around 27%. And now he's still at 27%. Throughout this entire time, with the exception of when he first entered the race, he has been at between 25 and 30%. You can see that he's had his ups and downs. You see when Kamala Harris first attacked him, he fell about 5 points, and now in Iowa and the betting odds, he has fallen after the Iowa results. He's also fallen in New Hampshire. But in the national polls, if we're looking at this, the polls that are actually going to mean more when it comes to things like the Super Tuesday states, in states like Texas, North Virginia, North Carolina, California, Alabama, all the other states, and then even states like New York and Florida, which I believe that he'll be able to win. Bernie Sanders is just second place in too many states to be able to propel himself over the top unless he is able to win all of the first four states, which isn't completely out of reason, but for now we'll leave it at this. But yeah, in the national polls, he has stayed even throughout this entire time. But going to the general election, assuming he can win the Democratic primary, looking at the general election here, we can see Biden's up by 5.4% in terms of the general election polls against Donald Trump. You see, there was only one poll done recently in the past month, I think, that had him even tied. All the other polls than that showed him ahead in terms of the popular vote. And while Donald Trump only does need around 45 to 46%, last time he got 45.8% and was able to win it in an electoral, not landslide, but he was able to win comfortably. He only needs around 44 to 45% of the vote. California and New York will turn even more out against him because the Bernie voters will probably be turning out. They know that they have to turn out this time. Um, he'll probably lose the popular vote by a large margin, but he doesn't need that much. But even in some of these polls, like you see three polls here, the LA Times won with 5,000 registered voters. With only a 2 margin of error, he's ahead by 9 points. And Donald Trump, even with the margin of error in favor of him, he'd only get 42%, which is not enough for him to win. If we're looking, as you can see here, Biden's ahead by 5.4%. If we look at comparing it to the other Democratic candidates, the thing I'm arguing he is more electable than, you see Bernie is still up by 3.7%, but he has been losing in some. And in the polls where Biden's been ahead by 9, for example, he's only ahead by 6 or 7. You see in this poll here, the poll that had Biden up by 9, you could see if this is within the margin of error, Trump goes up to 45 and he can win the election from that. In this example, he's ahead in the popular vote, which you wouldn't even expect. And same thing with Warren. Warren's only ahead by 1.8%, and Buttigieg is only ahead by 0.6%. Those are from the national polls. But if we go to the individual state polls, uh, the swing state polls, we can see, for example, Michigan. I think this is the only state where Bernie's actually ahead. Bernie's at 6.7% ahead. Biden's ahead by 6.5. Warren's ahead by 2. But then if we go to other states like Pennsylvania, for example, you can see Pennsylvania, Biden's ahead by a whopping 7 points. We see a Quinnipiac poll with 1,000 registered voters. It does have a 4.2 margin of error, but Biden's ahead by 11% in this poll, for example. He was only ahead by 1 in the next poll. And this poll was ahead, morning call, he was ahead by 9. But he's ahead by 7% in this. Sanders is ahead by 3.7. Warren is ahead by 2. I think if you could even argue that Bernie Sanders, for example, is against fracking and wants to close all the fracking plants. Same thing with Elizabeth Warren. And that makes up a lot of the Pennsylvania economy. Trump could attack him for that. Medicare for All does not have good approval ratings. I think it's around 40%. That's not going to be enough to turn out enough voters, to swing enough voters to the Democratic column. You compare it to even North Carolina, a state that hasn't gone Democratic since 2008. Biden's ahead by 3.4%. Sanders is ahead by 1, and Warren and Buttigieg are both losing to Trump. If we compare to even some other states, Florida, for example, Florida's going to be a huge state. Nobody even thinks it's going to go to the Democrats, but Biden is ahead by 3%. Sanders is ahead. He's in a tie, actually. The most recent poll had him up by 6, but I'm not really sure about that poll. But in terms of overall, Biden is still winning against Sanders in terms of the polls. If we're going to go over to, what's another one? I guess we go over to Arizona, a state that hasn't gone since, I think, 1996. Biden's actually winning, and this is the state that flipped the Senate seat in 2018. Sanders is down by 5, Warren's down by 2.3, and the one poll with Bloomberg had him up by 7, had Trump up by 7. So that's showing Biden ahead in a lot of these polls. And if we're looking at we'll look at the YAPMS map. So assuming all these states that Joe Biden is able to win, we'll give Iowa to him, we'll give Ohio, we'll give Georgia, we'll give Texas, and then we'll give the Democrats, we'll give him New Hampshire, we'll give him Maine at large, and we'll give Trump Maine second. And then we'll give Joe Biden in Virginia, we'll give him Colorado and New Mexico, we'll give him Nevada and Minnesota, and we'll give Nebraska second. And this is, I think, most likely what's going to turn out, and then you have some swing states. Biden is winning in the polls in North Carolina and Florida and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Arizona. That puts him at an electoral landslide. Even in some polls, he's been winning in Ohio. In some polls, he's been winning in Texas and Georgia and Iowa. And obviously, the map is not going to look like that. That would be completely ridiculous. But it shows that even if Joe Biden loses Arizona, he loses North Carolina, and he loses Florida, Joe Biden still wins. Joe Biden only needs to win the Midwest here, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. He's winning in Pennsylvania by 7. He's winning in Michigan by 6. He's winning in Wisconsin. Let's check what he's winning in Wisconsin by. We didn't look at that. Going down to Wisconsin here, Joe Biden is ahead by 3.7, which is more than any of the other candidates combined. So that gives him a big win. He's ahead by more than 3.5 points in all 3 of these states, even Pennsylvania's home state, by 7 points. And you think, how could Trump win at this point? Sure, he could win New Hampshire, maybe. Sure, he could win Nevada, but even then, he just gets him over the top. But you got to argue, it seems kind of difficult to argue that Joe Biden is not the most electable candidate because, according to the polls, he would win in Florida, and he would win in even North Carolina, and that would put it 322, which I think is the exact result that they got in 2012. And obviously, the polls are not always right. We saw that from 2016, but it does show that compared to all the other candidates, Joe Biden has withstood everything so far. He's withstood all the gaffes. He has withstood all of the, relentless attacks from his other Democratic candidates, as well as from some of the media. I'm not saying the media is against him. The media is heavily leaning Democratic. But even from Trump, for example, Trump's attacked Biden more than anybody, and he even wanted an investigation into him because Trump knew that he is the most electable candidate. Trump knows that all the polls are showing, and even some polls aren't even within the margin of error. Like some polls, I think we saw the Pennsylvania poll, for example. Pennsylvania's got, 20 electoral votes? Yeah, Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. That is the same size as Illinois, for example. If we're looking at this, a large poll, a Quinnipiac poll, which is a good poll. This is obviously a long time ago. But if we're looking at even more recent polls from November, but it shows that Joe Biden is still the most electable candidate. He has, like if we're looking, for example, at his approval ratings did used to be a lot better. He used to have polls, he even had some approval ratings where he's up by 24 points, for example. And then now you've got polls where he's down by 0.5, by minus 5.4%. You can see he still has a favorable rating averaging around 42 to 46%, and that's with the Bernie bros who are relentlessly attacking him, who are very against Joe Biden, for example. Whereas you've got Trump, who's united the Republican Party and has not really been able to gain much more than that. He's got 95% approval in the Republican Party, and you see that if we're looking at all of his presidency, you see halfway through 2018 he was at 44. He is now at 46, and sure, I guess you could argue he's been on the rise. If we look at the end of October, he was down at 42. He's now at around 46. And you could say that continues to rise. And then people say, oh, well, Donald Trump had a 37% approval when he was elected president. Yes, because Hillary Clinton was also a very unpopular candidate. They both had similar approval ratings, which were in the high 30s, low 40s. So Joe Biden, even here, he has better approval ratings than Trump. And it's used as a talking point to say why he's not electable. But many of the Bernie bros would end up coming around to him if Bernie's not the nominee. Maybe. I don't know how stubborn the Bernie bros would be. But the whole argument with this video was just to point out that Joe Biden is still the most electable candidate. I'm not saying he is going to beat Donald Trump in this situation. The polls are not always right. Not everything that you see online is always going to be right, as we saw in 2016 as a lesson. We learned our lesson, but it shows that Joe Biden, compared to all the other candidates we have seen, is still the most electable. He is winning in all the polls. He has trends on his favor. He has midwestern appeal to some people still. And while this all could change, he could go down, as it stands now, he is still the most electable candidate. He is the person with the highest chance of beating Donald Trump, at least in my opinion, for what I've seen so far and what I'm showing you right now. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please don't just dislike this because you like Bernie or you like Trump. I'm just pointing this out to say that Joe Biden is an electable person just because of all the factors that he has going for him. But yeah, please like and subscribe as always. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys tomorrow making my final prediction for the state of New Hampshire for the New Hampshire primaries. So yeah, stay tuned for that video, and I will see you guys later.